So it looks like the next government agency that Elon Musk and his little gaggle of incel creeps are going to be targeting is the Department of Labor. They have already laid siege to the Treasury Department, where they have gained access to the payment systems and essentially the back-end infrastructure of the Treasury that disseminates money from the government to wherever it's going, different parts of the government or to people who receive Social Security and that sort of thing. There's some dispute as to whether Elon's incel crusaders have read-only access or actually have access to the ability to edit code. Which is, a major difference. One would be that they just have the ability to look at the code and suggest changes. The other would be that they have the ability to alter the foundational code of how our government works. Now, these are not only unelected bureaucrats, these little creepazoids that Elon Musk employs, but also Elon Musk is totally unelected. So this is effectively a coup. They are sieging these government agencies, and I don't buy the fact that they have read-only access. That doesn't pass the smell test. That's exactly what they would say. A couple days ago, they were telling us that these guys were not accessing the government systems at all. And now they're telling us, they have the access, but they're not making any edits to the code. I don't believe it. And essentially what people inside the government are saying is that they are demanded to give whatever access the DOGE team wants, and that they have no choice, and that because Trump fired all the inspector generals, there's nobody to go to about it and report that there is some malfeasance here. So the idea that they're not going in and editing things or making plans to edit things, is just not consistent with what we're already seeing in terms of the behavior and what we know their plan to be. So it's very possible that we are going to see some major fallout because of them putting their little gremlin hands all over the Treasury Department. We haven't started to see that yet, but any number of things could happen. Obviously, they could shut off the flow of money to anywhere that they don't think it should be going, but there also could be unintended consequences of them just fucking around with these systems. These are old systems as well. So even though these are supposedly, super geniuses, the idea that they are not going to make mistakes as they ransack the Treasury Department, one of the most powerful pillars of the government, is just naive. They have no idea what they're doing. Elon Musk has no idea what he's doing in relation to government. So there almost certainly will be some consequences to the fact even that they are just accessing these systems in the way that they are, let alone whatever it is that they actually intend to do. So we haven't seen that yet, but even before we start to see the blowback from that and our grandparents stop receiving their Social Security checks or whatever it may be, they are setting their sights on the Department of Labor. And this is the government agency that deals with labor complaints from employees, safety issues, essentially applying regulations on employers, big and small, to make sure that they are respecting the rights of their workers, not creating unsafe or hostile work environments, that kind of thing, paying people properly. And so obviously this is a department that isn't even operating to the capacity that it should. The labor situation in America is nowhere near what it should be, and employers are able to get away with a ton of malfeasance. And obviously Elon Musk hates departments like this because these are the departments that are tasked with making sure that he doesn't abuse his employees, that he allows them to unionize, and doesn't use contract trickery to avoid paying them and that sort of thing. Not to mention Donald Trump, who has made a career off of using contract trickery to not pay his employees. So it is obvious why Elon Musk wants to target this department. Not exactly obvious what he intends to do with it, other than, just like with the Treasury, laying their greasy little hands all over everything that they can, and anything that they think they can launder to their right-wing ecosystem of sycophants as wasteful, or look at this thing that the government is doing because it's supposed to do, and then use that as an excuse, use the feigned outrage as an excuse to cut it, do away with it, and also pressure the employees who are in these government agencies who know how to do their jobs to leave. And so they want these agencies to be empty so that they can fill them with loyalists that the Trump team has been preparing for a long time. This is a part of Project 2025, to remove as many government employees as possible, really all of them, and replace them with loyalists who will do exactly what Donald Trump and Elon Musk say to do. So there are already protests ramping up over this in Washington, D.C. They're crowding the Department of Labor building. There's been a lot of protest. I think that some DOGE employees already went into the Department of Labor building. And so that sparked these protests and basically sparked the alarm that this is where they're going to be focusing their attention next. So that is exactly what needs to happen. Somebody pointed out on Twitter that, we are at the point where the only answer here is to physically prevent these people from entering the building. And so creating a massive crowd of people out front that will do so and prevent them from entering the building, it's the only way to stop them from laying siege to these departments, and especially this department that directly deals with labor. What I don't think they're quite prepared for is the fact that labor is maybe the most militant of the United States electorate. And we haven't seen a ton of militant labor action. But some of these things that the Donald Trump administration wants to do regarding labor absolutely has the potential to spark an incredible amount of labor outrage. So our job as this continues to unfold, because even if they are able to successfully stop Elon from entering the building tomorrow or the next day, they're not going to stop. And it's entirely possible that these type of mass protests are going to be what pushes Donald Trump towards using the military against citizens or calling martial law to some extent, whatever. So our job is to agitate in this situation as much as possible. We need to agitate labor. We need to advocate for a general strike if DOGE lays a finger on a single function of the Department of Labor. And it's just, what we can't do is allow for the goalpost to keep moving and for us to keep kind of normalizing the idea that this unelected psychopath, Elon Musk, can hire whoever he wants, a bunch of little psychopaths in training, to do whatever he wants with the federal government, let alone the fact that he doesn't understand how any of it works and doesn't care how any of it works. All he cares about is how it affects him and his businesses specifically. And so, as I've been saying before on previous episodes, we need to recognize that while Donald Trump is going to create chaos, and their goal is to empty out these agencies and to try to create a vacuum of power, and in some cases just make the government as ineffective and unable to function as possible, both because they hate the government and they don't want it to function, but they also want the average American to look at the mess that has been created and say, see, government doesn't work. We just need to do away with all of these organizations. We need to do away with the Department of Labor. We need to do away with the Department of Education, etc. And so that is the function of ruining the government's ability to carry out its tasks as normal, even though it may seem so counterproductive to take control of the government and then ruin as many aspects of it as possible. What they want to do is create such a dumpster fire that then they can blame the Democrats, blame the bureaucrats, whatever, and continue to drive the nail further in the mind of the average American that government doesn't work. And we can only trust Donald Trump to do something about it. And so in these moments where chaos is created and essential tenets of not just our government, but our economy are undermined, the chaos that is created in those moments is actually going to represent opportunity for dissent in a way that it doesn't exist without this type of disruption of American life. And another example of this would be the CIA, because apparently Donald Trump has now offered buyouts to all CIA employees. So probably not all of them are going to take it. I don't know how many of them will. But the ideal scenario for Donald Trump is for every CIA employee to take a buyout and leave so that they can fill that with loyalists. And so obviously that's scary, the idea of Donald Trump's, loyalists being in control of the levers of the CIA. Who knows what the implications of that are? But there's a couple problems with it. First of all, the idea that they're even going to be able to fill those positions with people who know how to do the job at all is not promised. And really none of these people who are activating this coup have any idea how to operate the government agencies that they are destroying. And so in some way, about 50% of their intention is being fulfilled just in their ability to destroy these government agencies and sort of stop them in their tracks. But the other 50%, in terms of being able to re-engineer these agencies to do what they want them to do, is not promised. And so, especially in the case of the CIA, what I see is that America is about to become rudderless in a way that we've never really seen before, pushing all of the employees of the CIA out, even if you plan to replace them. The interim that's going to happen there, I don't think people are really prepared for whatever the guardrails that the CIA puts in place are to be completely taken off. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's a good thing for those guardrails to be there. In fact, when it comes to organizing that is aimed at upheaving the status quo, the CIA and agencies like it, the intelligence community, are essentially the agencies that are tasked with creating the rudders of our society so that organization doesn't go past a certain point, political rhetoric doesn't go past a certain point where it is going to overthrow the U.S. government. So obviously they've failed to do that when it comes to the right wing. The intelligence community, the FBI, the CIA have been warning for a long time that right-wing extremism is like the number one threat to American stability. And this is what they were talking about. And so without any type of guardrails or the monitoring of American discourse that takes place within the CIA, within the different intelligence communities, there is opportunity there for essentially an overthrow of this new government order that we are seeing. And that is only going to be useful to us if we take advantage of it as immediately as possible. And so the coinciding of Donald Trump emptying out the CIA and laying siege to the Department of Labor and doing things that directly fly in the face of all labor unions, whether it be the UAW, which has been fairly anti-Trump, or the Teamsters, which is fairly pro-Trump. The thing about unions is that if you go against their interests, they're going to go against you, or at least the incentive is going to be created for them to. There's only so many excuses that a union boss, like I believe Sean O'Brien is his name, the head of the Teamsters, can make when the president is directly undermining and destroying the power that union has. So at a certain point, what I'm saying is these union bosses, whether they like Trump or not, are going to have no choice but to sign on to a general strike. And so our job is to agitate for that as aggressively as possible, really because it's the safest option. Because while mass protests are starting to break out in different cities, and that's good, and we should continue encouraging that, that's actually a more dangerous form of dissent of the Donald Trump administration, because that is what is going to lead to Donald Trump calling martial law and trying to tamp down these protests. However, the more massive protests are happening in more places at once, the less the government is going to be able to tamp those protests down, especially if Donald Trump has undermined the very infrastructure that is tasked with exactly that, from stopping mass protests, from undermining the government itself. And so not only emptying out the agencies that are supposed to do that, but filling them with a bunch of idiots who don't know how to do the job, creates a moment in time where mass protests could be more effective than they ever have been. But I think that labor action is an essential piece of that, because while mass protests are good, they also, in theory, can be put down pretty quickly with the threat of violence or of actual violence. I mean, if the military starts unleashing fire on protesters, it's going to create a lot of fear very fast, and people are going to have to be very, very steadfast in their rebellion against this government in order to resist in those conditions. However, a giant labor movement, a giant general strike, mass labor interruption is something that the United States government is not prepared for and cannot put down as easily as mass protests. In other words, they might still call martial law if a general strike happens, but if all of the essential labor in the country is brought to a halt, that's going to interrupt even the military's ability to operate as normal. And not to mention that the other agencies that would be tasked with tracking, surveilling, and interrupting the organizing of protesters and union leaders, which it has done in the past. The CIA, FBI has been pitted against union leaders in the past. But if all those people are being dispelled from government, then they're not going to be there to do that. And the people who are there to do that might not have the experience to know how to do it. So I'm going to continue advocating on this platform for us to not despair, even though the situation that we are in is worthy of despair. And we should not underestimate the idea that what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the rest of them want to do is very bad. And I'm not trying to make the case that what they're doing is good for anybody. But we need to train ourselves to recognize the opportunity that comes with the instability that is being created by Donald Trump. Because using that instability against them, using their own blind spots against them, a la David and Goliath, is the only way that we're going to be able to take back the upper hand. And the sooner we can dispel with this illusion that Donald Trump was elected by some kind of mass shift of the electorate in his favor, and the electorate of America is just so much more right-wing and more pro-Trump, favorable to Trump than they were, is not true. Even if you put aside the evidence that we have now that voter suppression is really the reason that Donald Trump won, these mass protests that are starting to happen in different cities around the country are showing that Donald Trump was not elected by a majority of Americans. The majority of Americans do not support what Donald Trump is doing. And the more Donald Trump's actions start to interrupt the life of the average person, especially the average person who might be associated with labor unions or just a working person who works for a living, the more those people are going to be able to quickly be turned towards action against the Trump administration, whether they voted for him or not.